Well, hello. Welcome to Orchid Bloom's podcast. Welcome back, bloomers, to another episode on Orchid Bloom's podcast. I am your host, Orchid Brown, with Orchid Bloom's podcast. You can find me on TikTok, X, and Blue Skies at Orchid Eye Brown. This week's episode is on Rastafarians. In this episode, I will be speaking as a person that witnessed Rastafarians, as someone that had cultural proximity to Rastafarians. So let's begin. Growing up in Jamaica, Rastafarian men were never something I had to seek out. They were just present at the roadside, in the hills, on the beach, in conversations. They weren't a mystery to me in the way they might be for someone seeing them for the first time. They were part of the language of my childhood, not as an idea, but as people. And even as a child, I noticed something. Many Rastafarian men I encountered carried a joy, a groundedness. Not all, but enough that it stayed with me. What stood out to me wasn't what they had, it didn't seem to be chasing. I was a very observant child. I took pleasure in just watching people go about their day-to-day life, especially when, I'm in Spanish Town or, south of Kingston. Anywhere that I go, I always enjoy watching people. And so the one thing I noticed as a child was that everybody else around me was just stressing, trying to get this, trying to get that, trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills, their rents, and all of that stuff. So they were under a lot of pressure. But every single time a Rasta Man walked by, it was almost as though they had no weight on them at all. They were light as a feather, just happy-go-lucky, so joyful. And I thought to myself as a child, what do they know that I don't know? They just seem so connected to source. Like there is a knowledge that they're aware of, and they just float above any difficulties that everybody else could be facing. They didn't appear consumed by materialistic things. Through my observation, they didn't center appearance the way the rest of the world seemed to. While, my mom, my aunties, my uncles were always just dressing up really well, spending money, all of these things to try to keep up with appearances. The Rasta Man did not care. They did not care at all. They wore just, a wife beater. It's like a nice meshy one, very, Rasta Man printed, and some pants. They may have a belt. They may, and just regular shoes. And so they just did not care at all. Their clothing weren't about fashion or presentation. They were about functional comfort and intentions. It reflected their true personality, their demeanor, their aesthetic. And another observation I'd like to add is that listening to them, watching them walk by, there was music. Music in the way that they walk, music in the way that they talked, music just around them. And it was just a wonderful vibration that they gave off. It was so calming, and it was so inviting, and it was so pleasant. So many of them sung. They're in their own little world as they're walking down the street, and they're singing a song to themselves, and other people were enjoying it. Or they were humming as well. And of course, you have to kind of stop with the ruckus and the stress and the franticness that's going on through traffic with the buses and the cars. And you just turn around and you hear this humming of someone humming with this smile on their face. And then there was this rhythm as well that they just kind of gave off during that process. Even when they were just standing still, it felt like joy wasn't something they waited for. It was something they generated. As I got older, I struggled to find the language for what I was sensing back then. Now I think about it, and I couldn't identify it before, but I'm starting to understand now. And they seemed to be connected to source, not in a flashy or performative way, not loud, not trying to convince anyone, just rooted, completely rooted, like a tree, not a branch, not the leaf, but the actual bark, the tree itself. Their presence felt slower, more deliberate, like they weren't rushing towards a future that didn't exist yet or clinging desperately to the past. They were here, they were present. But just to be clear, I just want to say that Rastafarians are not a monolith. Some I encountered were playful, warm, quick to laugh. Others were serious, disciplined, and deeply principled. Some welcomed conversation, others preferred silence. That range that I just described, it mattered to me because it reminded me that Rastafarianism isn't a costume or personality type. It's lived, interpreted, embodied differently by each individual. I would hate to lump an entire philosophy of people into one package and say that all of them are just like this. They're not. They're just like the rest of us. They're all different in some way. As a child, I didn't understand Rastafarian philosophy in the formal sense, but I was curious. I remembered wondering, why did these men seem less anxious about money? Why didn't they perform for approval like everybody else? Why did joy feel internal instead of conditional? As an adult, I realized those weren't random traits. They were a reflection of a world view that questioned the system most of us are taught to accept without challenge. Again, my question was, what did they know that we all don't know? What enlightenment? How did their awakenness happen for them? I had so many questions because, again, it seems like they were outside of the system but living in the system all at the same time. And what was happening within the system did not affect them the way that it was affecting us. They just existed like a spirit. It's just there. And everything is just good for them. They're not as stressed. They're not dealing with all these stuff. They're not going out of their way, spending a shit ton of money trying to live a performative life. They were just themselves. And honestly, I kind of aspired to be that way, to just be the adult. And I felt that as a child. I thought, when I grow up, do I want to be like these people that I'm seeing all around me who are stress pressed and depressed? Or do I want to be that person that is a carefree person, not carefree to the point where I don't have any responsibilities? Yes, in the system, you kind of have to have responsibilities. You are judged if you don't have responsibilities. And so I find the Rastafarians were being judged for not having a lot of responsibilities. They were seen as, maybe deadbeat fathers because they weren't spending all this money and chasing the bag and chasing that lifestyle, the European lifestyle, of course. But I mean, I saw them with their kids. I saw the way they managed their homes. They were very strict. They were very involved, even though it didn't look like they were involved. They were very involved. They knew what was happening with every single one of their children. And yes, there was a lot of children. They love having children. I guess, maybe birth controls wasn't something that they wanted to incorporate into their religion. So they had a lot of children, right? And they were involved, even though it didn't seem that they were, because they were so calm. They just sat there, they listened, they weren't loud, they weren't boisterous, but they were just present. And so it looked like they were, deadbeat fathers, but they actually weren't. They just weren't putting on a performance for other people to witness. So I found that there was a lot of stigma that came with Rastafarianism, and they're always trying to make the Rasta Man look a little bit lower than he really was, because he wasn't a system accomplished as they were, because of all that they were chasing. And paying attention to all of this growing up and kind of seeing that all the people that were chasing, the performative life, those people that were chasing accolades and status, somehow some of them got it, and then some of them never truly reached it, because even when they did reach it, it wasn't enough. They needed to keep going higher. And yet everything just stayed present for the Rasta Man's life. Everything just stayed rooted and completely connected to source. That knowledge that they were, receiving through meditation and their connection to source just seemed so much more profound. But again, when people see a group of people that are not performing the way that they are, not stressed the way that they are, they view them as the enemy. They view them as somebody or something that should not exist. And so I feel like there was a stigma that came out about them. There was lots of rumors about them. There was a lot of things that people said about them that were completely nasty, and of course weren't necessarily true. Because again, people don't like seeing other people move through their own drum, make their own decisions. You either fall in line with the system, or you will be excommunicated from that system and viewed as something is wrong with you as a whole, as a people. And I feel like that is what happened. And so they received a reputation that most likely isn't true. Because like I said, what I have observed as a child did not connect to what I was hearing. Rastafari is an Afrocentric, Abrahamic faith and social movement that developed in 1930s Jamaica. It focused on the belief that Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie is Jah, God, incarnated, and the Black Messiah. It emphasizes Pan-Africanism, liberation from Babylon, which is Western oppression, and Zion, Africa, as the promised land. Rastafarian philosophy, at its core, challenges Babylon, not just as a plate, but as a system, a mindset, a structure that values productivity over humanity, accumulation over presence. And when you grow up watching people who don't fully buy into that system, it forces a quiet question. What is freedom? What if freedom isn't about having more, but about needing less? When we look at society currently, we do see people who are pushing the minimalistic movement and helping people to understand that having more is not as great as it's cracked up to be. You just have more stuff. At this point, you're just a hoarder. But having less is so much more meaningful. It means that your home has more space. Your kids have more places to play. You have less things to take care of. It means that you get to spend that time truly spending time with your family, enjoying your life, because you don't have more on your plate to do because you have too much, right? And so Rastafarians were clearly ahead of the game. They were way ahead of the game. And we're now in a situation where we're seeing minimalistic lifestyle being pushed. But really, the Rastafarians were doing it first. Or was it? Would it be Buddhists? Was it the Buddhists that came first? I don't know. But either way, there are cultures out there that believe in the exact same, philosophy of less is more. And now people are starting to get into it. They're starting to look at their circumstances, look at their environments, look at their family, look at what they have, and ask themselves, is it truly making them happy? Or are all of these things that we're buying to try to fit into a status or be performative, is it just hoarding stuff? Is it really giving you that fulfillment? And when you really think about it, A lot of people are buying all of these stuff to make themselves feel better momentarily, but it doesn't make them feel better long term. So a lot of people are taking the time to kind of question a lot of things. Very much so. Like, I even know that I have stuff, and I'm tired of cleaning it. But realistically, because of the way that I grew up in Jamaica and watching these Rastafarians, and my mind was being developed at that time, and I'm learning two walks of life. The Rasta Man way of walking, and then, everybody else that I'm seeing around me, family members who are stressed out, stressed, pressed, and depressed. Every single day there was a complaint. You wake up in the morning, there's a complaint. You go to bed at night, there's a complaint. It doesn't matter where you go, there's a complaint. There's always something that's wrong. Nothing is right. These people were not living. They're my family, but they weren't living. And they were just trying to keep up with appearances. They were trying to perform. And yet I see that Rasta Man just sitting on the corner with his, just his top on and a ripped up jeans. And he's just so damn happy with nothing, with not so much at all. He's just good. He's eating his sugar cane. His foot is up. He's humming and singing. And I'm like, why can't I have that? I want that. When I grow up, I don't want to be this stressed, pressed, and depressed. But at the time, I didn't understand that it was a system problem. The system is created under stress. It's created to stress you out. It's created to keep you pressed. It's created to put you in a place where you're depressed constantly. And it's not like I truly sat down and learned about their philosophy, but one day I just went up to one of them and just sat down and looked at them. I didn't even ask them questions, and they just started talking. They just started talking about the world. They started talking about, their philosophy, and I just listened. And let me tell you, it really shaped my mind. And I wish I had remembered those conversations going forward when I ended up in situations where I was stuck in a system and it went against my spirit to be in this system. It just wasn't working for me. And I wish I had remembered that, but I tend to remember things after it's done as like the spirit's way of letting me know that you needed to leave this situation. This is not what you were built for. You had made a decision as a child that you did not want to be stressed, pressed, and depressed. You made that decision. And so every time you end up in an environment that is a system, you will never fit in because you didn't believe in that system. You did not want that life. The status is not going to make you happy. Being performative, you tried it. Were you happy? No, I wasn't happy. What do I really want? I want to be able to come to my home. I want my home not to be just full of hoarding shit. I don't know how else to say it, but I did not want all of that. I'm the type of person that just want to put on a t-shirt and a jeans, and of course I want to jump into my luxury car. That's just me, So the car part I can live without. That's just what I want. There's a difference. So this podcast episode just kind of brought me back to my childhood when I made the decision that I did not want to be stressed, pressed, and depressed in a system that was created to make me feel unworthy, to constantly remind me of what I don't have. And when I do work my ass off to get it, I just get over it because it was a momentary happiness. It wasn't true happiness. These are materialistic things. Status is great and all. Yes, it opens doors for you. You might make a little bit more money. You might know top people in certain places and be a part of that cult. Happy for you. It's a system. But ultimately, when you get home, you have to live with yourself. What is the real pursuit of happiness? Is it that job? Is it the status? Is it being above everybody else? Is that not your ego? Right? And so these are the types of questions I had to ask myself. And thankfully, sitting beside these Rasta Man sometimes and getting away from my family and just listening to them talk, was just, it was good. It was nice. Listening to them hum, listening to them sing. It was just calming. It was good. So I wanted to, of course, do this podcast episode for them. I did. Here are some things I remember from my childhood that stuck with me until this day. I can now look back and start looking into things that I may not have understand as they were explaining it to me. I kept hearing the phrase I and I, which is a central phrase representing the divine oneness of all people, the self, and Jah, which is God. When I heard this phrase as a child, I and I thought of Jamaica's national motto, which is out of many, one people. And it was the first thing that popped into my head. Mind you, as a child, when you go to school, it's quite strict in every school that you go to in Jamaica, where you go in, you stand up, you recite the national anthem as all the students would in the middle of the school. You stand in little boxes, but not boxes. It's just a lineup of people. And the teacher would stand at the front and they would sing the national anthem. And of course, the motto is something that they drilled into us at a young age, out of many, one people. And you have to do this every day. So of course, when I heard the phrase I and I, it brought me back to out of many, one people. And that's how I understood I and I, is through the Jamaican motto. Jah and Haile Selassie followers believe in one God, Jah, and revere Haile Selassie, with many viewing him as the second coming of Jesus, again, the Black Messiah. Rastafari is considered a way of life, not just a religion. What I admire about this lifestyle is their dedication to natural way of life, which included vegetarian diets. And let me make this clear. I've actually tried the food, not in Jamaica, because again, if you know Jamaica and you grew up in Jamaica, you know that your family is very suspicious of having you be at someone's house that they don't know and having you eat the food and spend time with them. So I could hang out with them on the street, but good luck with me coming to your house and trying your food. So I had tried this vegetarian diet when I came to Canada, and I met this Rasta Man, and he was having just a little gathering at his store downtown, and I ended up deciding to go, and I tried the food, and God, it was delicious. And I said, how, you went to the grocery store and picked up all of this? And he's like, no, in his backyard, he and his wife grows their food naturally. And everything that we're eating is from his garden at home. And I thought, wow, like who wouldn't want to eat natural foods, right? I mean, do you know how healthy your body would be if you avoided processed food like the Rastafarians did? They avoid it. At this point, I think they think it's a sin. It's a sin to eat processed foods. They don't eat pork and alcohol because, again, they want to keep their body pure, keep their body clean from the inside out, not just the outside in, inside out. They don't care what they put on their clothes, on their body as clothing. They don't care about any of that stuff, but they do care about what they consume. And even talking to my dad, I find that, my father living in the States was saying to me that, he has to fast about 3 days a week. And I thought, why does he keep doing that? And he told me, that he had to fast 3 times a week for 3 days out of the week because he has no choice but to eat processed foods. Because again, that's what the westernized society is built on. So everything is processed food. Everything that you have access to is processed food. It's not clean. It's not homegrown. There's chemicals, there's processing. You have no idea what you're consuming, even the stuff that they consider to be healthy, or they claim it's healthy. And he says he has to fast 3 times a week or 3 days out of the week just to kind of purge all that processed crap that he's eating. And he grew up in Jamaica, and he was in Jamaica a lot longer than I was. So for him, he just decided to just fast every 3 times a week or every week. And he will go back to eating what he has access to, because again, he has no choice. Especially if you're renting and you don't own your own house, you can't just prop up the backyard and turn it into a garden and start eating a vegetarian diet, which does not include processed foods, pork, and staying completely away from alcohol or caffeine. If you truly want to live a pure, clean life, you have to fast if you want to avoid a lot of illnesses that could pop up because of what you're putting into your body. Because again, that's a lot of chemicals you're consuming. It makes you sick. It will make you sick. You eat too much processed food, eventually your body will fail you. And so even in his old age, he's kind of like, nope, you won't catch me putting myself in a situation where I'm dealing with so many problems medically because I eat way too many processed foods. And so, yeah, I was proud of him for that. I was like, he's really taking this seriously. But, he would like to own a house and build a garden in the backyard for himself and go out and freshly pick everything that he wants to eat and cook his food every day. And that's how he would live. That's how he would live. So I always admired that as well. Like in my dream life, I have a big backyard, and in that backyard, I had a garden of vegetables, all of these things, even flowers that I would pick again, and put it in my home. And I would make food, maybe not 100% unprocessed foods, but the vegetables are fresh. Everything else is fresh. Maybe the rice is not fresh because you had to go out and buy it. I don't have enough space in that backyard to to grow all of that. But you see what I'm saying? I kind of wanted to incorporate that lifestyle in my future. And so whenever I have a vision of my future, that is what I see. So now let's move on to their dreadlocks. Their dreadlocks used to be an identifier, but a lot of people see dreadlocks as a style. Somehow it became very fashionable from back in the day, because back in the day they used to judge them for having dreadlocks and complaining about their hair and how it's not professional and it doesn't really fit into society. We even have cases back in the day where here in Canada and the United States, they would fire black girls because they had braids or dreads. It's just not considered to be clean. But somehow it became fashionable and a lot of people were rocking it even though they were not Rastafarians. So people do not understand the significance of the dreads. Yes, now it's fashionable, especially when it's well kept, but having dreads does not mean someone is Rastafarian. Rastafarians grow their hair into uncut, uncombed locks as a part of their spiritual practices. It symbolizes a lion's mane and a connection to the Nazarite vow. There is a deeper meaning to their hair. It kind of reminds me of the Samson story in the Bible where his hair was connected to his strength. And when he cut his hair, or when his enemies got the information about how his strength is connected to his hair through his temptations, he lost it and he died. And so it kind of brought me back to that biblical story in the Bible when I think of the deeper meaning and the spiritual practices associated with dreads and the significance of it. And I mean, if you truly think about it, if a Rastafarian truly chop off his dreads, it means that he's walking away from that philosophy, if you actually think about it, and is walking into the system and participating in the system. So it's kind of like they chose death. Another thing a Rasta Man is known for is smoking ganja. What people need to know about Rasta Man smoking ganja is that it is used as a sacred herb in sessions for meditation, spiritual insight, and connection to Jah. And yes, we would see, these Rasta Man in Jamaica kind of sitting anywhere smoking ganja, but they're mostly by themselves And they don't meditate the way that other people meditate, where, they have their legs crossed and their hands and their fingers touching and their eyes are closed and they're, meditation. Sometimes they're just sitting there, just looking out, fixated on something, just staring at it, smoking some ganja. And that is another form of meditation. Meditation doesn't have to look the same way that, the Western civilization has interpreted meditation to look like. Because I do find myself sometimes sitting in traffic and I would have certain music on and I would completely zone out and I'm in a meditation state, just sitting there. I sometimes do it at work for my lunch. This is why I don't hang out with people on my lunch break. I'd go to my car, I would eat something and I would just listen to words or not listen to words. And I would just sit there in my car after eating something. And I would be in a state of meditation. Sometimes my eyes are closed. I'm not sleeping. I'm just taking in my environment, clearing my energy, and allowing, the source to send me what it needs to send me in that moment. So you can meditate anywhere. And a lot of people have perfected being in a meditative space, even when a lot of people are around. It shows that you are experienced. And it's not as basic as a lot of people would try to make it seem to be. You go home, you sit on the floor, you fold your legs, you put your hands on your thighs and you close your eyes and you're just in a meditative state. No, I find that I'm meditating anywhere. I can meditate anywhere, just in complete silence. It doesn't matter if a lot of people are walking by. It doesn't matter if they're all talking. I am just in a meditative state and I'm getting the downloads. My mind is processing through a lot of things. And they say you need to clear your mind completely. But sometimes that's when the answer comes and you just have a complete dialogue in your mind. But you as the person is rooted. You as that person, no matter what the hell is going on around you, you're just completely still, rooted, fixated, and just calm, content. You feel that peace while you're surrounded by chaos. And I loved it. I really did. I enjoy using my meditation or having my meditation out in public, out in nature. It is one of the best experience. I just feel like I'm releasing so much and lifting a lot of burdens off of my shoulder. The only thing is I don't have some ganja. So I'm doing it strictly clean. Like there are no herbs helping me. So I'm going to have to just look at the trees and allow the nature energy to help assist with my meditation and my connection. So, but that is what they use it for. And let's talk about the colors. So their colors are red, gold, and green. Of course, all of these colors are my favorite colors. And I just love colors. But I grew up looking at them. And so every single one of these colors, if I wore it in a robe or in a top, it doesn't matter. I would look great in it. They're just beautiful colors. It is from the Ethiopian flag, which represents the blood, wealth, and land of Africa, Zion. So this episode isn't about defining Rastafarianism. So for those of you who joined this podcast episode hoping to learn about the movement, unfortunately, it is not my place to be talking about a movement that I am not deeply rooted in, something that I did not grow up in and dedicated my life to learning. This podcast episode is about acknowledging what the Rastafarians truly offered me without even a formal teaching. Like I wasn't formally taught about this. A different relationship to time. That's what I'm presenting through this podcast episode. A different measure of wealth. A reminder that spirituality does not have to look polished to be profound. For many people around the world, their first introduction to Rastafarian philosophy didn't come through conversation. It came through rhythm, through lyrics, through reggae. And our most famous Jamaican of all time is Bob Marley. So this came through Bob Marley to the world, and it stretched wide. When it comes to Rasta women now, growing up in Jamaica, I didn't see them often, at least not in the way Rasta Man were visible. They seemed to keep to themselves more private, less present in public spaces. Their absence does not mean they weren't there, though, just to make that clear. They were there. They were just quiet as a mouse. But because my access was limited, I wasn't able to learn more about Rasta women. I have met women who have dreads growing up, through my life, and they were not Rastafarians. Hair alone isn't belief. Appearance isn't doctrine, and culture is never that simple. That distinction matters, especially in a world that loves visible shortcuts. My first real conversation with a Rastafarian woman did not happen in Jamaica. It happened in Canada. And that experience reminded me of something important. Rastafarian philosophy, like any belief system, is lived differently depending on the person. Through that conversation, I learned that within some Rastafarians' interpretation, men may have multiple partners. And I learned that, and I think I was going to the University of Ottawa at the time when I met her, and she was a very successful Rastafarian woman that was attending the university, had her first child and, had a loving husband. Of course, all of this is based on what I have seen through social media, because again, she added me to social media. Some women actively consent to and accept that structure. And as she was explaining to me, it didn't harm her in any way for her husband to have multiple women. He still took care of the family. He still spent a lot of time with them, and they were still able to do a lot of family activities together where they were raising their child together in their philosophy as Rastafarians. All of these women were completely aware of what they were signing up for when they went into any relations with a Rastafarian, not because they were coerced. And a lot of people would like to make it seem as though a lot of women who are in these types of situations are being coerced. They're actually not. They understand the religion. Not religion, but philosophy. They stand by it, and they're completely happy with it. It did not mean she was discontent because of such decisions, but because it is aligned with their understanding of their faith and autonomy. All of it goes back to both partners understanding what the Rastafarian philosophy truly means and what it means to them. This is not a universal rule, and it's not a requirement to identify as Rastafarian, like jumping in and drawing out your dreads and spitting certain philosophy and saying that you're a Rasta Man just so you can have multiple women and it be accepted in that community is not it's not required. There's a lot of Rasta men that I've met that they have one woman and one woman alone, right? So I don't want this podcast episode to make it seem as though that every Rasta man you're going to meet in that philosophy that truly lives by the Rastafarianism, that they are all about having multiple wives or multiple women. It's not the case. I've met some who are incredibly loyal. It's one expression amongst many. And just like with any religion or philosophy, women's experience are not singular. They are shaped by personal choice, community, interpretation, and context. What stood out to me wasn't the structure itself, it was the clarity. There was no secrecy, no pretending, no moral performance for outsiders, just honesty about how she chose to live. I do not speak for Rastafarian women, just wanted to make that clear. I speak around my experience, and I leave space for voices that aren't mine. Because part of respecting a philosophy or people is knowing when to listen instead of explaining. Including Rasta women in this conversation isn't about filling in gaps. It's about acknowledging that visibility doesn't equal importance and that some wisdom lives quietly away from the spectacle, and that too feels aligned with everything I observed growing up. In the next episode, I want to talk about reggae, not just about a genre, but as a cultural carrier, a messenger, a bridge between Rastafarian philosophy and the global stage. Because before the world tried to brand it, market it, or simplify it, reggae was a language of resistance, spirituality, and survival. That story deserves its own space. This was Rasta Man, not a definition, but a memory, not a doctrine, but a reflection. And next, we'll follow the sound. That concludes this podcast episode. Thank you for joining me today on the Orchid Blooms podcast. Your support is appreciated. Take this time to subscribe, follow, rate, and leave a comment on the podcast platform of your choice. Our social media pages are Orchid Blooms YouTube channel, The Ambitious Obsession Network on Facebook, at The Ambitious Ops on Twitter, at The Ambitious Net on Instagram. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And until next time, keep blooming. I hope you have a splendid, splendid day.